All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Hannah, or Red Tail Hawk Hannah for today. And I'm so glad that we started off with our names and the animals that we enjoy and like. And one thing that I would love for you all to be thinking about during this presentation is why you love that animal that you chose. And maybe after the session, or maybe you know this already, you could think about how that animal is impacted by climate change. Because just like all of us are impacted by climate change, so are all of the animals that we love. And some of them are impacted positively and some of them are impacted negatively. So it might be interesting for you to take a look at how foxes are impacted by climate change, or how some of the birds you like are impacted by climate change, just as another way to connect with this topic. And thank you so much for that introduction that you did for me earlier, Kevin. Again, my name is Hannah. I'm the Climate Network Manager at the Wild Center, and I'm so excited to be here with you all today for your first workshop for the Youth Climate and Art Summit. I will preface this by saying that I'm used to presenting to high school students, and I noticed that there's a wide age range on this call. So please ask questions if something that I'm saying does not make sense to you. And I'm happy to answer questions throughout in the chat. Kevin, maybe you can help me if there's a question that comes up in the chat or something while I'm presenting. I'm happy to stop and address that. Um, and I also just want to say I'm so excited that there's people who are interested in science and art and walking and spending time outside. I relate to a lot of the words that you chose to describe yourself. So I'm really glad that we're all in the same room together. So I'm going to start off by sharing my three words and also a bit about my climate story. And this is something that I encourage you all to do as you're thinking about climate change. Maybe there's a story that you know about from a book that you've read or a movie that you've watched or a game that you play. Or maybe you have a personal story that you'd like to share as well. And so you can be thinking about your personal climate stories while I'm telling my story. And just so you all know, my three words, which I shared in the chat, are biker, reader, and singer. And those are some of the tools in my climate toolbox. So I love to bike instead of drive places. Biking brings me a lot of joy. I love to bike with my friends. I also play guitar and sing, and I sometimes write music about climate change. And it's a way for me to process my climate emotions and how I feel about climate change. Um, and I love to read. And so I read a lot of books, some of them about climate change, some of them fantasy, some of them about other topics. And so excited to share that love with you all as well. Um, but yeah, so my climate story actually is about birds. And so I'm really glad that we started with our animals. And as you can see, I have a little cardinal on the screen, the little red bird in the bottom right corner there. And my climate story is all about cardinals, and it's also about my family. So I'm going to share that with you now. When I was little, I remember looking out of the living room windows at our bird feeders that my dad would fill every day and seeing cardinals in the springtime and throughout the summer. And they were one of my favorite birds because they're so bright red. And I loved watching their beaks eat seeds and berries and other things that they like to eat. And I as I grew up, I realized that my love of birds was shared with my dad and my grandma. And my grandma taught my dad how to bird, and my dad taught me how to bird. And so this was a shared interest that a lot of my family members had. And as I was talking with my dad and my grandma throughout growing up with them, I realized that the cardinals were coming to our bird feeder earlier than when my grandma was a child and when my dad was a child. And sometimes the Cardinals would even stay over the winter where I grew up in Chicago in Illinois. And this was not normal, right? The Cardinals usually they would migrate, but they were not migrating. They were overwintering. And so this was a change that I saw in my own lifetime and in the lifetime of my family members, my dad and my grandma. is the behavior of this animal changing. It stopped migrating as much. It maybe was eating different foods. And so this is one way that I saw climate change impacting my life and the things that I love, is through the change in migration and behavior of this animal. And so I encourage you to find out what are the climate stories of the animals that you love, and what maybe motivates you to action in that story, and how does it make you feel, and what are some of the like threads of hope in that story as well. One of the things that I think that is hopeful about my climate story is that I can continue to pass on my passion and interest for birds to others, and get them to care about climate change through caring about birds. So that's my climate story. Thank you all for listening. All right. So before we dive into our topic for today, I just want to share a little bit about the Wild Center, which is where I work. And I'm curious if any of you have ever been to the Wild Center before. It's in Tupper Lake, New York, in the Adirondack Park. Some of you may have visited us before. Um, Awesome. Yeah. So it looks like several of you have been to the Wild Center. That's so great. And if you haven't been to the Wild Center and you're ever in the Adirondack Park, please come and visit us. We would love to have you. We're right on the Racket River, which you can see pictured here. We have this really fantastic boardwalk, that's elevated boardwalk where you can see the mountains. You can play in our spider web here. We've got a big eagle's nest that you can climb up into, as well as some amazing indoor and outdoor exhibits. So please come and visit us at the Wild Center. This is a picture of our building, and I also just wanted to show you on a map where we're located. So we are in Tupper Lake, New York, right in the heart of the Adirondack Park. Many of you live down near Albany and south of Albany, so we're a few hours north of you. And yeah, maybe some of you have made the trip up here. And we are a science center, we're a nature center, we're an educational facility. We have lots of different animal ambassadors who have their own stories to share and tell with you. So lots of fun things to do at the Wild Center, and would love to have you come and visit us. And one thing that we have done at the Wild Center in the last few years, last summer, we opened a new exhibit called the Climate Solutions Exhibit. And this exhibit is all about climate change and how we can take action to address climate change in our lives and in our daily actions. And so we use stories, just like the story I just told you. We also use lots of interactive things. We have a tinkering studio where I heard somebody say they like to build things. So the tinkering studio is all about building and creating and experimenting. We also have this really fun magnet wall where you can think about how can we transition to using electric cars or solar or wind energy. You can see the moss wall that's pictured here that has an outline of the Adirondack Park, similar to the map on the previous slide. You can see that border of the park, talking about how the Adirondacks is a climate solution and how we're absorbing a lot of the carbon in the atmosphere from our state, and how that is a positive thing that we have done to protect this land. And so there's a lot of amazing content in the exhibit space, and lots of like positive actions that you can take. I think sometimes when we think about climate change, it can be really scary and overwhelming. It can be kind of hard to think about, but climate changes can also be fun. It can help build community, and it can be a part of our daily lives in a very positive way. And so that's really what I want to talk about with you all today. It's not just the science and what's happening in New York State, but also what can we do about it, and how can we use what we know about climate change to improve our lives for the future. And a little bit more about the work that I do at the Wild Center. So in addition to the Climate Solutions exhibit, we also have a youth climate program. And every November, we have a big event, just like the one you all are participating in, called a Youth Climate Summit. And this summit brings together high school students from 25 to 30 local high schools. They come to the Wild Center and they learn about climate change action, solutions, and justice together. And we usually have some really amazing speakers. We have workshops like the one you're in right now, lots of fun food and interactive activities. So if you are in high school or going to be in high school soon, I encourage you to learn more about the Youth Climate Summit Network. And you might be able to come to our summit in the Adirondack Park. So please keep that in mind if you are a middle school student or you know high school students who might be interested in coming. And I just wanted to point out that the summit you are participating in right now during this workshop is a part of an international network. So you can see these stats are a little outdated. We, like Kevin said, we have over 200 summits now in 9 countries and 23 states. You are one of those summits. And so you're, a few of thousands of young people who have participated in these incredible events all over the world. So I just wanted to encourage you that you're not alone in your interest in science and in climate change and in art, that there are so many people across the world who care about these topics too. Okay, so are you all ready to talk about climate change? Can anyone identify the bird on the screen? Anybody know what kind of bird this is? Yes, it is. Well, it's probably a raven, could be a crow. I think it's a raven because it looks to me to be bigger than a crow. But yes, excellent work. Good job. And if you didn't know, ravens are really intelligent creatures. We have 2 ravens at the Wild Center as 2 of my coworkers, Onyx and Cora, and they both have broken wings, and that's why they were brought to the Wild Center. But they're really intelligent creatures. They can solve puzzles. They can make over 200 sounds, and really creative creatures. So definitely one of my favorite birds, especially in the corvid family. Okay, so we're going to start off by doing a little share out. So feel free if you want to raise your hand and you can unmute and share, or you can type in the chat. What do you think of when you hear the words climate change? And I noticed that many of you have drawing materials too. So if you want to draw a picture and show, you can do that, or you can unmute and share or type in the chat.
The climate change bill. Oh, Greta. Greta.
Yeah, Greta. That's a great picture to come to mind. She is a really inspirational climate hero, definitely one of my climate heroes too. Thanks for sharing.
Animals are getting in trouble.
Yeah, animals are definitely impacted by climate change, us included, right? We're animals too. So thanks for sharing that. I know it can be kind of hard to think about, but it's really important for us to share our thoughts and our feelings about climate change.
I wonder, why do animals change? Why did the octopus used to have legs and now it has flippers?
Mm-hmm. That is a great question. I know you're one of our science lovers, and I don't have the answer to that, but I think it's really important for us to think about how animals are impacted and also how they change, right? Not even just by climate change, but also just over time. How do animals change? That's a great question that we can explore together.
What did you want to add? I saw an octopus at the aquarium.
Oh my gosh, that's so fun. I love sea creatures. I used to want to be a marine biologist, and going to the aquarium is such a fun way to connect with the ocean. So thanks for sharing. Um, okay, so we have in the chat hotness, warming, change, forest fires, rising oceans, animals are impacted. The world is changing because of humans, hot earth, humans being intensive to the world around them, and the world is changing quickly and drastically because of humanity. Yeah, so those are all really great thoughts to come to mind and talk about when we think about climate change. We're going to move on. Thank you all for thinking about what comes to mind when you hear the word climate change. And if you think of any other things that come to mind or anything that I say that brings up another thought, feel free to type it in the chat. Okay, so what do we need to know about climate change? Basically, the long, short story of this is that climate change is real. It's happening right now. Humans are causing it. We know that it's urgent and that we need to take action. We have all of the solutions that we need to take action and address climate change, and we can all make a difference and be a part of the solution. So that's where we want to start. We know that it's real, it's happening, it's us. We need to talk about this topic and we need to do something about it, right? So we're going to talk about both of those parts of climate change, both what's happening, especially in our state, in New York State, and what can we do to address it. And the first thing I want to talk about with you all that I think is really important to understand before we dive in to some of the climate impacts in New York State is weather versus climate. So does anybody have a thought on the difference between these two things or a similarity between weather and climate? This is a very, I will say, topic that's super important because sometimes people get these words confused. So that's why we're going to talk about this first. Feel free to unmute and share.
Both can change the weather can change depending on things. Both can.
Yeah, so both change, right? From day to day, month to month, year to year. That's great. So change is something that they have in common. Absolutely. All right. I see another hand. I thought I saw another hand. If you raised your hand, feel free to unmute and share.
Weather is something that changes frequently. Like it's sometimes one day it's raining and one day it's like cloudy. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't really. It sometimes changes with human accord, but it usually doesn't. And climate change usually changes very slowly, but we've made it change faster and faster.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh my gosh. I could not have said it better myself. That was a great explanation. So weather is what we feel day to day, and climate is what we feel over long time spans, sometimes even longer than our whole lives. So you can see this graph goes from 1860 to 2000. That is a long, long time. That's like over 150 years, right? So a really long time to think about the temperatures slowly rising. So that's climate. And weather is like, what do we feel today? Like right now, it's like I have a slight breeze and it's 75 degrees and sunny. But this, season over time, this might be an above average or below average feeling of temperature. So one of the ways I like to talk about this is that weather is like our outfit, what we are wearing today. But climate is our whole closet of clothes, all of the things that we own and might wear throughout our whole year. And one of the other reasons I like that analogy is because as the weather changes, the storms get more extreme, the temperatures get warmer, our whole wardrobe is going to change, right? We're going to be wearing different things. So you can think of weather as like your outfit today and climate as all of the clothes that you own and might wear throughout your life. Okay, so another thing that I just want to clear up before we dive in is that climate change is real and it is us that is causing it. So we had some future and current scientists in the room, and I just want to share that scientists really, by and large, agree that climate change is caused by humans, that this is not a natural process. This is a natural process that humans have sped up because of our activities. And so you can see here, 97 out of 100 climate scientists believe that humans are changing the global temperature. So it's not really a debate, right? It's a really small minority of people who don't believe that climate change is happening because of humans. So we don't even really need to worry about that, right? We know that climate change is real and that we are causing it. So just want to clear that up before we move forward. So where is climate change coming from? I think it's important for us to think about what are the things that humans are doing that are causing climate change. And you can see from this infographic, I'm just curious, what do you notice on this image? What are some of the things that you see pictures of or that you see words of in the chat, or unmute? Feel free to just popcorn share what you see. Power, dangerous gases, cows. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, there's trucks.
Trucks, yeah. So this is excellent. You guys are seeing all of the important things that I wanted you to notice on this image. So the biggest sources of climate change that humans are doing are electricity, which is about a third of our emissions, transportation, which is a little less than another third, and then industry, which is about a fifth of our emissions. And you can see agriculture, so growing food and animals, as well as commercial. So this is like businesses, local businesses, and larger corporations and businesses, and our homes are all big contributors. But the big three are electricity, transportation, and industry. And something that I want us to think about is, at least in my lifetime, I'm 30 years old, so I might be a little bit older than some of you on the call. I might be a little bit younger than some of you on the call. In my lifetime, I remember when I was in probably 4th grade, I first heard about the carbon footprint. Have any of you heard of carbon footprint before? Is that a familiar thing? Yeah, okay. So some of you have, some of you haven't. Basically, the carbon footprint is the idea that like we as humans have an impact on the planet, and we can measure that impact by tracking how much we travel, what we eat, and how we live. And I remember in 4th grade calculating my own carbon footprint with my class. That was an assignment I got in school. And many, many years later, so like in the last couple of years, it came out that the carbon footprint calculator was created by fossil fuel industry. So the places where we get our gas for cars, things that fuel the trucks that transport our food and other items to us, they were the ones who created the carbon footprint. And really the purpose of them creating the carbon footprint was to put the blame of climate change on individuals, when really it was the big corporations, the people who are extracting oil and creating this really big carbon problem, who are the biggest emitters, right? We can see that on this image here. So I just want to take that burden off of you. If you feel personally responsible for climate change, yes, we all contribute a little bit, but really it's the big emitters, the big companies that are responsible for the majority of our emissions. And so while it's important for us to take action and think about how we can live our lives differently, it's even more important for us to tell those companies and those who are most responsible for emitting to change their ways. So we're going to talk about that more later, but I just want you to keep that in mind, that if you feel like it is your fault that climate change is happening, it's not your fault. It is a collective responsibility from everyone on the planet, but you are not as responsible as many, many, many other way larger people who are contributing to climate change. So the other thing I want to talk about is that climate change is happening and it's urgent. We know that we're already impacted by climate change. Maybe you have some examples of how you've been personally impacted by climate change. Just thinking back to like my climate story and thinking about how I noticed birds are impacted by climate change. You might have a personal story. Maybe you experienced the wildfire smoke that we had last summer, or maybe you've experienced a really hot day this year already. Those are ways that we interact with climate change in our daily lives. So we know that making the planet stay at the current temperature that it is going to be really, really difficult. We are going to have to change a lot of aspects of how we live in order to make this happen. And scientists agree that this is an urgent situation that we need to take action on right now, and we need to start doing it faster than we are. Just want to share a little bit about New York State. What is New York State going to feel like in 2100? So 2100 is what, like 75 years from now. Some of you on this call are going to be alive in 2100. I probably will not still be alive in 2100, but many of you will be. And New York State is going to feel a lot different in 2100 than it does right now. It's going to feel like Richmond, Virginia. Have any of you ever been to the Blue Ridge Mountains, Virginia, North Carolina? If you've ever been to that area of the world, it is a lot hotter than it is here. So just want to give you like a mental picture of what we have in store. Look at how much further south Richmond, Virginia is than New York State. And that is what our area is going to feel like in 75 years if we don't change anything. That's business as usual. So some of the other specific diving into what does climate change look like in New York State? The two biggest changes that we are already seeing are related to temperature and precipitation or rain. So temperatures are going to get warmer in the summer. We're going to have less cold winters. So we might not have as much snow or ice as we're used to. We're also going to get more super hot days. This year's a great example of that. We had 3 over 90-degree days in the Adirondacks in June, which is the earliest we've ever had an above 90-degree day. And I actually had to buy an air conditioner this year. Usually people who live in the Adirondacks don't need an air conditioner because it cools down during the nighttime, and then we don't need to have an air conditioner in our homes for when we sleep. But I had to buy one this year because it was so hot in my house, I couldn't fall asleep. And that's going to be more common for people who live in New York State. And then precipitation, so rainfall. We're going to see more rain. We're going to see more extreme storms with like inches and inches of rain. We're going to have more droughts towards the end of the century, so around that 2100. And we're also going to see less snowfall, so more rain, less snowfall.
I feel like basically the more global warming happens, the more air conditioners people have to get, and the more like wasteful, like, oh my gosh, I'm blanking out on the words, but like chemicals and stuff is getting really
refrigerants. Yeah, refrigerants
is getting bigger, and like so like the hotter it gets, you know?
Yeah, and that is something that's a big challenge that I see that we need to think about is how can we have sustainable ways of cooling buildings? That's going to be a really, really important part of how we think about our homes and our businesses and the places where we work moving forward is how can we cool those places sustainably?
If we can change it, would there be the same temperatures in winters and summers?
Yeah, the winter will still be colder than the summer, definitely, but it's just going to feel warmer than it does right now. And we are already seeing that happen even in your lifetime. The winters have slowly been becoming warmer, that change in the climate. Good question, though. All right, we're going to keep moving forward. So some other impacts we're going to see specifically in New York City. So you might not know this. How many of you have been to New York City? Raise your hand if you've been to New York City. Okay.
I have.
Yeah, so a few of you have been to New York City. That's a part of our state in New York, right? And New York City is on the coast. It is close to the ocean. So specifically in New York City, we're going to see the oceans getting warmer, which impacts the wildlife that lives in the oceans. We were talking about octopuses earlier. They're going to be impacted. And then also sea level rise. So the sea level is rising really, honestly, pretty slowly, 1.2 inches per decade. So this much per 10 years, right? That doesn't seem like a lot. But it is much faster than it has been changing in the past. And by 2100, that magic number we've been talking about, places in New York City could be underwater because of how fast the ocean is rising. So it is important to know that. And then something that's sort of an indirect effect of all of these different things we've been talking about, heat, sea level rise, and precipitation, is the effects and how it's going to impact our human health. And so we know that extreme weather and temperatures impact our ability to cool off. We might need assistance like an air conditioner, cold water, shade, places to cool off. We'll need more of those places because of the extreme weather that we're experiencing. We also might have challenges with air quality. How many of you last summer noticed the wildfire smoke or weren't able to go outside because of the wildfire smoke? I'm just curious. Yeah, so some of you remember this, right? I remember this too. Um, and that is one example of how climate change is impacting human health. And then also changing habitats for plants and animals. So we've already talked about migration, right? This is kind of one of the things that I talked about with my climate story, but also things like ticks, like you see a picture of here, and mosquitoes that carry diseases are going to be moving to different parts of the state and our country, and might be carrying different diseases that we haven't seen before. So all important things to know about and consider when we're thinking about how climate change is impacting us in New York State. And I just wanted to share a quick note about climate change and mental health. This is something I think about a lot because I work with teenagers, I work with young people. I myself identify as a young person, and I've definitely seen the impact that climate change has on my own mental health and the mental health of those around me. And so I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that and notice that it's important for us to recognize and name our climate emotions. So things like maybe you feel fear or anxiety. Maybe sometimes you feel hopeful or excited. Maybe sometimes you feel hopeless, or like you can't do anything. So if you want to take a moment to share a climate emotion that you felt in the past or something that you feel right now, I'd love to hear kind of where you're at right now. I feel like an emotion that I'm feeling right now is nervous because I'm presenting about climate change to a new audience of people I haven't met before. But yeah, okay, I see anxiety, depression. Yeah, right. There's some really hard emotions that come along with talking about climate change. Fear, definitely. And it's important. I just want to acknowledge it. So it's important to feel those feelings. Mad, yes. Oh my gosh, I love that. Yeah, yep, nervous, worried, anxiety, hopeful. See that we all care. Yeah. So it's important to feel the whole spectrum of emotions when it comes to climate change, because even those cycles of anxiety, anger, fear, sadness can motivate us to action. And so it really is important for us to like know and acknowledge those feelings and learn how we can work through them and cycle through some of those other more positively associated emotions too, like hope or excitement or like wanting to take action.
I also feel like angry because people aren't doing anything about it, and then soon like it's going to be affecting them, and they're going to be like, God, what did we do? And people who are like helping them, who are trying to help like climate change, like they need more people to help, and people around them aren't doing anything. So it's like when the people who don't care about climate change experience it, they're going to want to do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's so important. Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it. I think that it's also really important for us to think about how can everyone who's alive right now work towards climate action. It's not just young people whose responsibility it is to take climate action. People who are all ages on this call, we all need to work towards a better future together. It's not just the younger generation who's going to be living through some of the more hard impacts of climate change. So thanks for bringing that up. And I just want to acknowledge it's okay to feel angry about climate change. That is can be a really strong motivator for taking action and wanting to help create change. So yeah, that's a good thing to feel sometimes. The other thing I want to mention, we can't talk about climate change without talking about social justice and climate justice. And so I don't know how many of you have heard of that term before. How many of you have heard of climate justice before? Or is that a new concept? Maybe. Okay. So, yeah, this might be somewhat new for you all, but it's important for us to talk about that climate change does not impact everyone the same. But you were just talking about this, right? That some people are already being impacted by climate change. Others have the privilege of maybe they're slightly impacted, but they can ignore it, right? There's some people who can't ignore the impacts of climate change in their lives right now. They're feeling that. And a lot of those people are people who are experiencing other forms of inequality and injustice. So people who don't have a lot of money, people who live in rural areas, people who live along the coast, people who are Black, Indigenous, people of color. You might have heard that term before. A lot of these folks are impacted by climate change more than others. And so it's really important to think about their realities and what they're experiencing and centering their stories and their solutions as a part of how we move forward. And so I just want to mention that because I think it's important for us to consider that, like, we might be impacted by climate change, but there are other people in the world who are impacted by climate change even more, and in different ways than how we're impacted. So we just, climate change requires empathy, right? If we're going to take climate action, we have to think about how climate change is impacting everyone, the whole planet, not just ourselves. So now what? We just kind of heard some scary, maybe fearful things about climate change. I want to acknowledge that it can be scary and it can be hard to think about, but it's also so important for us to understand what is happening before we can talk about solutions. So I want to take a deep breath together. You can breathe in with the shapes and then breathe out back down to the line. We're going to take a couple of deep breaths together. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. And this is one of my favorite strategies when I'm feeling overwhelmed about climate change, is to take a moment to breathe in and out and just center my breath and my being. So you can use this strategy too. You can feel free to continue breathing in and out in the rhythm that you've been doing. And as you do that, I'd love to hear some things that give you hope for the future. What are some of those things that give you hope? Feel free to unmute or type in the chat. And it can be anything. It doesn't have to be related to climate change if you're thinking about something else. Something that brings you hope.
I am making letters to a bunch of people who left them on all night. So I'm hopeful that they'll write back to me.
I love that. That is such a great action that you can take. Writing letters and sharing our stories and making requests from other people, that is a great way for us to deal with our climate emotions and take climate action. Our amazing community, knowing that there are other people who care. Bee populations are rising. Plants still live. I see you maybe dealing with some hopelessness right now. I'm going to hold space for that too. That's okay. Something that gives me hope is thinking about all of the creative solutions that already exist and that are going to continue to exist, and all the amazing art and creativity that comes from the climate movement. Yeah, and people won't be poor, right? That can give us hope, right? Maybe we can work together to eliminate that as we're working towards climate solutions. I feel so much better when I do anything. Yeah, totally. I agree with that too. Taking action can make us feel hopeful and be a source of hope.
I don't really feel any hope because, I mean, I know that people are doing things right now, but like, I've been experiencing like a lot of other climate things down in Mexico because like I'm Mexican, so I go down there, but like no one down there is doing anything. I mean, I think that no one down there is doing anything because I don't see anything happening down there.
Yeah.
And it's mostly like it's not really their fault. It's just that they're not doing anything. So I don't really hope.
That's fair. And I want to hold space for that too. It's okay to feel hopelessness sometimes too. Sometimes that's how we feel, right? And there might be other times where we feel differently. But one thing I did want to mention is on this slide, have you ever heard of Shea Bastida? She is the woman here in the bottom right, and she is a Mexican American climate activist. And I love that somebody brought up earlier writing letters. Shea has an amazing letter that she wrote to her grandmother that's all about her climate grief and anxiety and some of the actions that she's taking as a Mexican American to address climate change in her home country and in the US. So I'm happy to share the link to that video. It's a really moving video. And she might be a source of hope or inspiration one day for you. It's okay to feel hopeless, but I think it's also, you know, sometimes we can get inspiration from others who share our identities. So I'm so glad you brought that up and shared a bit of your climate story with us. Thank you so much, and encourage you to check out Shea Bastida because she is a really amazing climate activist. Okay, so thanks for sharing some of the things that give you hope, or maybe some of the climate emotions that you're feeling right now that are preventing you from feeling hope. That's okay too. But we're going to talk now a little bit about solutions, and I want to watch this cute little short video with y'all first. And I love this video because I think it's so cute and funny. And something that's really important to me is incorporating humor into when we talk about climate change. I think we need to have an emotional release about climate change sometimes, right? It's okay to laugh and to have fun together when we're talking about climate change. And that sometimes that's a way for us to process our emotions. Yeah, and I'm not sure what the song is. It's definitely a popular, real TikTok song that's very funny. I can try and find it for y'all. But yeah, so not only do TikTok influencers believe that we have all of the climate solutions, but scientists agree that we have all the climate solutions that we need as well. So sometimes we hear in the news media or maybe from our friends and family that we have to create new technologies to address climate change. And while new technologies may be able to assist and help us, we actually have everything that we need to take climate action right now. We just have to scale it up. We have to do more of it. And so I think that for me can be a source of hope sometimes, is that everything that we need, we have all the tools, we have all the technology that we need to actually address and make a huge impact on climate change right now. And we're going to talk about some of those solutions. One of them being a really amazing piece of policy that we have in New York State, the New York State Climate Act. So if you didn't know, New York State is one of, I think, 3 states that has put into our state laws that we need to take climate action and made some really, really huge commitments to doing that. This climate act that we have in our state is the most comprehensive, the biggest climate act of any state, including the ones we always hear about doing good things for the climate, like California. So it's, to me, a source of hope that our state government does really care about climate change and is taking actions to help us move forward. And some of the things that we have potential to do in New York State, or that we could continue doing. I'm just going to share a couple of examples. So one of those is that we have a huge, huge capacity because of New York City and the other cities that we have in New York State to have rooftop solar on businesses and homes and other buildings. So you can see a picture here from Brooklyn, New York. But there are so many more examples of and potential for us to do this. And so the fact that we have that space and we have the technology is really exciting and moving forward together. We also have a huge potential for increasing our onshore wind, so windmills and wind energy. You can see this wind farm in Martinsburg, New York, which some of you may be familiar with. But this is another thing we're going to start seeing a lot more of in New York State, is this building more capacity for wind energy. We also, in New York, are the third largest state that is creating clean jobs and climate jobs. So you can see this is one example, creating jobs for installing solar on people's homes. So that's one type of climate job that you can have. But really, New York is investing in climate jobs in any field. So I heard some of you say you want to be a scientist. Even if you end up being a chemist or a biologist or an ecologist, there's going to be climate aspects of your job. And that is the future of jobs in our state, is that every job is going to be a climate job, whether it's being a nurse or a doctor, whether it's being a lawyer and creating climate laws and policies like the one we already have, whether that's being a teacher or an educator like I am, and teaching others about climate change, or maybe it's in a trade. Maybe you're helping build those windmill farms or installing solar on people's homes. There's so many different examples of climate jobs. Really, anything you might think of that you might want to do is already a climate job, and is going to continue to be important for climate. So, yeah, we're going to keep moving on here. In New Rochelle, New York, this is an example of some solar or some EV charging infrastructure that we have for cars. And by 2035 in New York State, all of the vehicles that are produced, so the cars, trucks, anything that's produced, is going to be a zero emission vehicle. So that's a huge commitment, right? Thinking about every new car that's produced is going to be an electric car. And I wanted to share this picture of one of the climate marches that happened in Manhattan. And I love this picture because I see people of all ages in this photo, taking climate action together. And this is something that you can do at any age, right? You can demand that your local government, your national government, the corporations in your state take climate action. And this can be a really powerful way for us to build community and hope together. And I just want to end this little segment about the New York State specific solutions with, you can make a difference. And I invite you to join the movement in whatever way you see fit. I love this photo because I see so many people smiling in this photo. And even though sometimes we feel hopeful or we don't feel like making a joke about climate change, sometimes we can find joy in community and in action and in humor and many other forms of taking action together. And there are a couple of other climate solutions that we didn't necessarily mention before that I wanted to bring up to the forefront. So if you see a climate solution that you're excited to share about, represented on the slide, or maybe you don't see one, a picture of something that you think of as a climate solution, I'd love to hear what you are thinking about when you think about climate solutions. So what do you see pictured here? What's in your head thinking about climate solutions?
So we could try to prevent dangerous chemicals from coming into the air. That can affect the animals and planet. Like when they sprayed something that
Are you talking about DDT?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When DDT was sprayed.
Yeah, that's a great example. That's a really big success story, right? We had people like Rachel Carson who wrote about and advocated for the elimination of DDT. And then we saw the birds and the human population sort of get revived because of that, right? We were negatively impacted. We were getting sick. Animals were getting sick. And then DDT was outlawed, and those animals and human impacts were covered, right? So great example. Sometimes those historic success stories can help motivate us for the future, and help us think about what we can do creatively or differently than we're doing right now. So great example. Thanks for sharing. Cow pasture in the forest, agriculture as part of the solution. Yep. And agriculture really in two ways. One, in thinking about the kinds of food that we eat. A lot of times we hear like, oh, like, if you're really if you're really a friend to the climate, then you should not eat any meat. And really the call now has shifted to eating less meat. So we just need to think about maybe it's one meal a week for you where you eliminate meat. Or maybe it's one meal every day that you commit to not eating meat. But just eating less of it can help with the impact that agriculture has. Also, silvopasture, which is a type of farming practice where you integrate more trees and shrubs and other plants, is a really sustainable solution. And then composting our food waste is a big thing that we can do as well. Yeah, making posters and hanging them. I love that. We see a picture of that in this bottom right corner here. Sustainable farming, absolutely. Less gas. Yeah, maybe we can use bikes or other forms of transportation. Reusing cloth. Yeah, or mending our clothes instead of buying new ones. That's another way we can take climate action. Protesting. Yep. Composting. Awesome. You got them all. That was great. Thanks everybody for sharing. And just wanted to put up some other things. So a lot of the pictures on this slide are things that we think about or hear about a lot, right? Energy, food, transportation, education. Those are some big ways we can take action. But some less maybe obvious ways that we can take action, but are just as effective, if not more effective, are education, right? Coming to this summit and learning more about climate change and acting on that through creative means, whether it's, spending more time outside and nature journaling or creating art for the exhibit you're going to have. Community gathering, that's what we're doing right now, right? We're all on a call together. We're sharing about our climate emotions. We're learning about climate change together. We're thinking about climate. Super important thing to do. We need to be talking more about this issue. Dismantling systemic oppression. That's a lot of big words, but this is related to that climate justice topic that we talked about and thinking about how we can spread the impact of climate change so that certain people are experiencing the really bad parts of climate change. Shifting capital. This is all about how can we vote and show up with our money and use our money differently to be a climate solution. Voting and policy making. You can do these things even before you can vote. You can participate in your local government. You can write letters. I heard about one of you on the call writing letters to different businesses to turn their lights off. Amazing. That is such a great way that you can participate and be civically engaged as a citizen before you can vote. And then holding corporations responsible, right? Thinking about, can we write them letters? Can we vote with our dollars and not purchase things from those companies? Like, for example, I'm not suggesting that any of you do this, but something that I do in my life is I boycott Amazon products. So I have lots of friends and family members who use Amazon, but I personally have chosen to not purchase anything from that site because it's just a part of what I do. And there are lots of other things that I do that contribute to climate change. I totally am aware of that. I drive a gas vehicle to work every day. I have to commute pretty far. I have an oil furnace in my rented home. And I can't really change that. That's something I'm not really able to do. I've talked to my landlord and I can't change it. So there are other ways that I contribute, but one thing that I have made a choice to do to hold a corporation accountable is to not purchase things from there. So that's something you could do too. You could think about a company that you want to not support because they have a bad climate impact. And just to end our time together, I want to encourage you all that we have the solutions. This is urgent. We need to move on climate change, but that we need everybody. We need a mosaic of voices. We need a patchwork of people working on this issue, and we need everybody's ideas and creativity to turn things around. And that includes everyone on this call and everyone you know and everyone they know and literally every single person on the planet. And that we can do this. We are able to turn this around and to take action, and we can do that together. I wanted to end with some other resources that you all are welcome to explore on your own time. So one of them is writing or drawing activity, the climate action Venn diagrams. I love this worksheet so much. It's a really fun one that you can write or draw your answers to. But basically, you answer the 3 questions: what brings you joy? What are you good at? And what needs doing? And that can help you identify a climate action that you can take. There's also a really amazing website called Project Drawdown that has some incredible videos and graphics and photos. And they also have some really fun challenges that you can do by yourself, with your family, with your class, your classmates. And they have some really great examples of climate actions that you can take if you're feeling stuck and like you can't think of anything that you can do in your daily life. Drawdown is for you. And then lastly, I'd recommend reading this book, How to Talk to Your Kids About Climate Change. This is a local author, Harriet Sugarman. She's from New York State. She lives in New York City currently, but she's a really fantastic climate educator and climate communicator. And her book is fantastic. So definitely recommend reading that. And I'd love to turn it over to you all now for some questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I think we have about 10 minutes left. So love to hear from you all. If there's anything else that this brought up for you that you want to talk about, any questions that you have, any other thoughts that you want to share, this space is for you. And thank you all for your participation so far. This has been really fantastic.
Okay, so I'm saying about the letters, and some of them might write back and say okay, but I think at least some of them we might have to go outside like signs and march around their building. And if anyone wants to help me, they're welcome to.
Awesome. So trying to find some friends to recruit to help you. That's great. And I love that you're thinking about secondary actions you can take too. If the letters don't work, what are some other things you might be able to do? And I just want to encourage you that your voice and your passion for this will not go unnoticed by those the folks that you're chatting with. So that's I'm so inspired by that action, and I really encourage you, and I'm so glad you're trying to find others to help.
Thank you.
All right. It looks like we have a question about our thunderstorms a part of climate change. This is a great question. We just had a thunderstorm last night. I just will preface by saying I'm not a climate scientist. But in simple terms, yes, thunderstorms are a weather example of a weather event that is going to become more extreme over time with climate change. We're already seeing that. For example, where I live in the Adirondacks, we had an extreme thunderstorm that poured 4 inches of rain, which is way more than a normal storm should dump. And we had roads that were, impassable because of that. And in a rural place like where I live, there's might only be one road that goes in and out of a town. So that can have a huge impact on emergency services like ambulances and fire trucks coming to rescue people and help out. Those services can be cut off if the road can't be passed. So that's one way that a thunderstorm could be a part of climate change. Great question. Those extreme weather events we're starting to notice more of. Great question. New York's climate laws, if other states will follow. Yeah, I think that we've already inspired a few other states. And I'll say we have also been inspired by other states who have similar laws and built on those to make our super comprehensive climate law So this work is done together, right? We are leading the way in many ways in New York State, but we're also learning from other states who are doing this. One example of us learning from another state is New Jersey, our neighbor, has mandated climate change education in all K-12 schools. And New York is trying to do that as well now. And we're looking at how New Jersey passed that in their state law, so that we can do that in New York State as well. So we're all learning from each other. But yeah, great question. I'm just looking back at some of the chats that I missed. I see that somebody said that they could make a YouTube video to about climate change to educate others. I have a teen that I work with here in the Adirondacks who has a really awesome YouTube channel. And she does that, and she makes like minute or less videos, really short, that she posts on Instagram and YouTube. So that's a great way to educate others and also to like be creative and have fun. So definitely encourage you to do that if it's something you're interested in. Oh yeah, it's called Explore More Challenge. I'm sure she would love to have more followers on YouTube or on Instagram. So you can look her up if you're allowed on those sites, or ask your parents if they can show you. But I'll drop the link in the chat here.
And if I can jump in here for a second really quick before we get off, I just want to share that our next event is happening next weekend. We're going to be visiting Hudson Crossing Park, which is an amazing park. I don't know if you've been there. Everyone is invited. It's going to be really fun. They have a beautiful nature playground, meaning like the slides are built into the hillside and the trees, and we can get down to the water. We're going to take a look around at their art program because they have used art to help communicate about the park and the ecology of their island. It's on an island. It's a great place. So keep an eye out for your emails. I'll be following up with you about that. Hope to see you there.
I'm so excited to hear updates from your future events. I don't know if I'll be able to make it into any of the in-person ones, but I'm super excited to hear updates from Kevin, and I'll drop my email in the chat too if any of you want to share updates and would love to see some of your art too. I know one of you made a really amazing logo for the summit that I've been enjoying sharing with others. So would love to have you send some of your examples and your thoughts, or stay in touch.
Great. Thank you so much. So I think is there anything else that you want to share, Hannah?
I don't think so. Thank you all so much this was like the most participation I've ever had on a Zoom. So I think I need to work with elementary and middle school students more. This was amazing. And I really appreciate you all hanging with me. I know I had a lot to share. So thanks everybody for your participation and your thoughts. It was great to meet you all.